That programme will be repeated on Sunday evening at 7:15 on 2. And next week, that vital task of finding food reveals an intriguing world of play and counterplay, exploitation and theft as hungry animals protect or secure their next hard-earned meal. And there's this illustrated BBC book to accompany the series.
In this week's Radio Times, I report on the reaction of people to this turbulent year of change in South Africa.
Follow me around the Hertford Gold Office on a busy day preparing for the new series, yes. Hello?
And there's a full guide in Radio Times to Daytime UK.
From Liverpool, Glasgow, Birmingham, Manchester.
Manchester's where I am, but you can find all three of us on the cover of the new Radio Times. It's the easiest way to put yourself in the picture.
Time to dip into the old post bag now. Here's Anne Robinson.
Good evening, and has anyone else noticed how daft the storyline's getting in Howard's Way?
Many several dozen, Mrs. Minan, but for those unfamiliar with the naughty nautical folk of Carrott, let me explain. This town is full of incredibly shallow people, of whom by far the most interesting and endearing is conniving Ken, who really needs a silencer on his bracelet, and loyal Leo, whose mouth is permanently open, waiting to catch flies. Anyway, things, as Margaret Wiltshire explained, have got a little out of hand.
Yes, Edward Freer,
now deceased,
has married Polly,
who's done a runner.
So Polly is now stepmother of Charles, who is the father of Polly's daughter Abigail. So Charles is now his daughter's stepbrother, and Abigail is Edward's granddaughter and also stepdaughter.
Furthermore, says Mrs. Wiltshire,
if Charles marries Lynn, Abigail becomes Lynn's stepdaughter, and if Abigail marries Leo, she then becomes Lynn's sister-in-law, and Leo then becomes...
Ah, but Abigail can't marry Leo, can she? Because wicked old Edward Freer has said in his will that little William doesn't get any money unless Abigail and ex-hubby Orrin start making a go of it. Loyal Leo, of course, doesn't think much of horrible Orrin and his disgusting suggestions.
I love her, Leo. I want her back. Just name your price. Anything you want, it's yours.
Well, there's only one thing I want. It's been coming to you for a long time. Abby's not for sale, Orrin. And don't you ever let me see you near her again.
What acting? And if you think that lot are confusing, you haven't seen Rab C. Nesbitt.
My husband was rolling about in stitches because it was hilariously funny, but I was totally baffled because I couldn't understand a word. Do you think there could be subtitles for us Southerners?
OK, Mrs. Hudson.
Hey, look, Dad! A rat in a hat!
Sitting in a mat. Pretty clever, isn't it? What are you in that?
No, bloody well, it's not wicked. That's not how I brought you up, was it? To rip the piss out of dumb animals.
Well, Mary! What is it?
Where's my dinner? It's in the micro.
In the micro? You'll be bloody lucky. You are half an hour late, boy. Your dinner is in the rat.
In the rat? You feminist wee swine!
And those who understood that perfectly will no doubt agree with Janet McCoy, who has spotted and asks why.
Maggie in On the Up, supposedly from Edinburgh, has a Glaswegian accent.
Does she?
What newscaster conducted the intimate interview with Charles and Diana in October 1985?
Charles and Diana who?
And talking of Trivial Pursuit, that doesn't seem to be much clearer than either Nesbitt or Howard's Way.
Can anyone understand what's going on? First there's the winning of a wedge, then a free-for-all across the board.
Simon Crosswaite would rather a simple point system, after all, he says.
It's good enough for Mastermind.
Matthew Butty would rather...
Somebody informed the quizmaster that the computer only uses one small cube with spots in this game, which is a die, not dice, singular, not plural.
Now, on to drama and a positive avalanche of posts following the Screen One offering the week before last. Can You Hear Me Thinking? Starring Judi Dench and Michael Williams as the parents of 16-year-old Danny, diagnosed as schizophrenic. The play charted the painful and uneven struggle of two well-meaning people trying to do what is best for their son in the face of those outside who regard Danny as just another dangerous mental patient best locked up. And it showed that for even middle-class, articulate parents, there is no beating an inadequate system. Unmoving. And first, a couple of letters like this one from viewers who sign themselves only M and B of Kent.
My wife and I thought the play was in rather poor taste, particularly for parents of children suffering with this disease. Why make entertainment out of someone's misfortune?
And from the professional side, an angry Dr. Robert Raitt, who is
consultant in adolescent psychiatry
from the Royal Edinburgh Hospital, where he has particular responsibility for youngsters with severe psychiatric illness. Dr. Raitt felt the play showed
an unrelieved picture of poor professional practice and effects on the family that were so gloomy.
Although Dr. Raitt admits
Many incidents of poor professional practice portrayed in the play were familiar, even if, thankfully, unusually combined in a single case.
and he concedes.
The impact of severe chronic illness with a family was realistically portrayed.
However, Dr. Rait's main reason for writing, he says, is the effect the play might have on those who suffer from other types of psychiatric disorders, because he claims it reflected
Neither resilience in the face of adversity nor the remaining fun of being an adolescent. Instead, we saw a madcap straight out of Victorian or medieval folklore that I was barely able to recognize from my own professional experience.
But to balance Dr. Rait's view, dozens and dozens of letters from parents of children suffering from schizophrenia, packed with praise, and most of all, letters grateful that the subject was given such a sympathetic airing.
What a well-researched and superbly acted play.
Writes Helen Williams from Birmingham, and she goes on to explain.
My own brother suffers from this illness and has done for 15 years. He's the eldest of 4, and we all experience an almost unbearable degree of pain and hurt as a once close and caring family. Thank you for making more people aware of the problems.
A mother from Hampshire says she identified fully with the Harris family's struggle for help from outside.
After 11 years, I have just got my son, who sits all day in his room with the curtains drawn, into a hostel to give me a break.
And yet another relative of the victim of schizophrenia wrote,
Many of the scenes reminded me how it was for my family some 20 years ago when my brother became ill. It is true you lose the person, but at least modern drugs control the violence and aggression. But what lasting effects these drugs have will only be known in years to come.
Now, on to question time, back with a new table which fills round into ever such a dinky queue, and what's more, has a licence to travel. Oh yes, London, Cardiff, Blackpool. And it was in Cardiff that Dee Whittaker found it refreshing that Chairman Peter Sisson...
Unguardedly exclaimed, "Oh, crumbs!"
So nice, said Mr. Whittaker.
At a time when foul language and offensive expletives are becoming so frequent.
R.I. Dewar of Maida Vale considers, however, that the programme has become a...
charlatan's benefit. Entirely predictable answers to entirely predictable questions.
And complains that...
the programme has become nothing more than an hour-long chance for those of all political persuasions to make cheap points at the expense of each other, devaluing the word discussion, so forcefully used by Mr. Sissons in his introduction.
And as for it coming from Cardiff, says David Jones, who comes from Cardiff...
There seemed little point in bringing it to Cardiff, because there was no regional flavour, either in the panel of speakers or in the questions asked. The culture of Wales was not represented.
And while he's about it, Mr. Jones wants to add he's not much taken either with the satellite link. To be precise, he thinks it's...
an unnecessary and expensive thrill.
In which case, I don't suppose he was bowled over much by Newsnight's outside broadcast from Germany on the historic night of unification. One of the comic highlights of last week, you thought, in the event a bit like taking question time to Trafalgar Square on New Year's Eve.
It made me glad intellectual is not a recognised job description in the UK,
said Peter Sewell of Liverpool.
Jeremy Paxman was interviewing 3 notable Germans. A small woman who said she didn't like fireworks, a bureaucrat who said that as a state official his job was secure, and a professor. Charles Wheeler was standing around looking like he'd rather be in the bar. Intellectuals obviously can't cope with celebrations.
Christine Cole would probably agree, since she also thought...
Jeremy Paxman and Charles Wheeler threw away the live coverage of this event.
Naturally, says Miss Cole.
There was a party air at the Brandenburg Gate, with champagne corks popping, flags waving, fireworks shooting. The Germans very sensibly kept speech-making to the minimum.
Yet, she says, there in the middle was Jeremy Paxman...
trying to conduct a serious discussion.
In any case, ends Miss Cole.
The time for serious discussion was before or after the celebrations, not during. Newsnight failed to convey the mood and atmosphere.
Ah, but Points of View will put that right. I'm going to leave you with a little bit of that marvellous celebration. Oh, and I've told Jeremy Paxman he is on no account to try and interrupt to ask awkward questions. Goodbye.
Klinger's colleagues are concerned about his behaviour in M.A.S.H on BBC2 now. To be followed by the concluding episode of Portrait of a Marriage, and a decision-making time for Rita and Violet, let alone for Harold and Dennis.
Tonight here at the Royal Albert Hall, big-time British boxing arrives at last for Dennis Andries. The WBC World Light Heavyweight Champion defends the title against Argentina's Sergio Morani. Great venue, live coverage and recognition at last for Andries. And Sportsnight also goes behind the scenes with New England manager Graham Taylor. How does he pick the team? How does he see the future? Sportsnight at the earlier time of 10:05.
Now all the kids are in bed, let's talk about something that we don't normally talk about when they're around.
Wait for it. Before that, the 9 o'clock news with Martin Lewis, and that's in 5 minutes. This is BBC1. Now, a party political broadcast by the Labour Party.
The real problem isn't just that things are worse now than they were last year. The real problem is that in so many vital respects, things are worse now than they were 11 long years ago. Inflation, unemployment, balance of payments, economic growth, interest rates, manufacturing investment, housing starts, tax burden, world trade share, domestic trade share, and so many other measures of performance. The Tories are not even back at square one after 11 years.
15 years ago, we were top in Europe, but today, we're the pits in Europe.
As it stands at the moment, they don't care. They never will care.
I think at the moment the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer.
People ask me, why is Britain, once the workshop of the world, now producing fewer manufactured goods than France, fewer than Italy, half as many as West Germany? Soon we'll be producing fewer goods than Brazil. And I have to tell them that one of the reasons is that enterprising British people are being held back by a dogmatic and indifferent government.
I see lack of training as being the key problem.
I'll put it to you this way, right, the tradesmen of yesterday, right, out here today.
I did YTS when I left school myself, and I hoping for a job at the end of leaving school, and I didn't get a job at the end of doing the YTS scheme, so I think that was a load of rubbish as well.
Then you can work in a shop for YTS, and all you're doing is cleaning floors and brewing up.
You're not learning the experience.
They say we cannot train until the economy succeeds. Surely the opposite's true. The economy cannot succeed until we train. We now train less skilled employees than any other country in Europe. Not just less than France or Germany or Italy, but less than Greece and Portugal too.
I think we're ending up with children that just haven't got the education. It's going to be a bunch of morons, isn't it, in the next century? I mean...
Well, education is failing in this country. Something drastically got to be done to reform the education facilities that are provided for our children.
I think that the education system in this country needs some money spending on it.
We didn't have a great education just after the war, but today it's just beyond belief.
And I pray for my grandkids. Pray for them for this lot.